Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Daniel Dolph. I'm going to be joined by Sitefinity MVP and partner at Flywheel Strategic, Scott Snowden. There he is. So Scott is an expert in personas and journey maps. He does it every day, and so today he's going to share his top tips with you. But
I do take the weekends off, Dan. It's not every day.
Fair.
Thanks for the
5 days a week. 5 days a week. Enough to be pretty good at it.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Dan. So we're going to take you through some of the way that we do work on building personas and journey maps. Here's what we're going to go through for the next 20, 30 minutes or so. Do a little bit more of an intro. Got a check-in question just to make sure everybody's awake and paying attention. I'm going to introduce a couple of workshop exercises or some templates that I've got available for you. But then the substance of what we're going to talk about today will be a collection of slides to take you through details about personas and journey maps and giving you some practical examples of that. And then a few next steps to follow once we're done our conversation. So Dan, what's your role at Progress?
I'm the Sitefinity Marketing Campaign Manager. So appreciate you all joining the webinar today.
And I appreciate everything you've done to help us get this organized. Yeah. And I'm Scott. I'm one of the partners at Flywheel Strategic, and as Dan said, a Sitefinity MVP. We've been working with the platform since about version 3. So it's been around this space for a long time. So let's get into it here. How to build personas and a journey map. So in the GoToMeeting control panel, there is a handout section. So take a click on that, pop the little toolbar over, go to handouts. There's 2 fillable PDFs that we've made available. One is a persona template. The other is a journey map template. Download those. They're fillable PDFs. They're not meant to be something that you're going to necessarily, take into your next exercise, but they're going to give you an example of how this process works, and you can adapt those and build upon them for your own benefit and your own use with your team. But we got one for building a persona and one for a journey map template. I'm going to go through personas first, and if you're looking at that template, it might help you just sort of appreciate what I'm talking about. You might want to fiddle around with it and fill it out as I'm talking, or it might be just a handy resource to come back to after the conversation. So hit those and do a download, and hopefully that's something that can give you some benefit here as I go. So here we go. What are personas and journey maps? In the world of digital experiences, these are core UX concepts and tools. Outside of the digital experience ecosystem, personas have been around for a long time. This is a traditional marketer's tool. I'm sure a lot of people on the call are familiar with these, but they really do shine when applied to the work that we're all doing as digital marketers and digital experience developers. It is best when you combine these with broader UX research. You want to create accurate personas and journey maps based on real-world findings. So understanding what kind of user experience you're trying to build, what kind of behavior you're seeing from your audience and your audience segments, and then thinking about personas and journey maps in that context is the ideal way to go about this. So don't just do it in a bubble. Don't just do it with your team in the boardroom or the virtual boardroom. If as much sort of real world findings as you can layer into this exercise, the better. But it can be used as a great standalone tool. So if you don't have time or the resources necessary to do a more comprehensive engagement, don't worry about it. Forget I said that. Use these tools because they're going to be incredibly valuable, especially as a benchmark, as a reference as you move forward. And if you're not even in part of a team, this is a great exercise to do for yourself, to help ground you in all the communications and experience build out work that you're going to be doing. I will often just myself even casually knock out a few points that would sort of stand in for a persona, if I'm trying to think about the best way to even write a white paper or do a blog post. I've got a lot of these ready for the work that we do ourselves, but sometimes that can have a lot of value, just thinking about, oh yeah, who am I trying to talk to, and writing out that definition for myself. It really does clarify your user needs and your user goals, and it stands in for that audience segment and gets your team, if you're in that sort of a setting, around that same objective, and it gets people all on the same page. It's really helpful as you're going through the rest of the project to share these with your design team or with your strategists and your architect developers and your content team. So again, it sort of grounds the whole team against that common audience segment. So that's generally speaking the value and the benefit of these two concepts, which I'm going to talk about more specifically individually. Fire in any questions as I'm going here again, and we'll put as much of this in context as possible. So what is a persona, if you're not familiar? It is a fictionalized representation of a user. So it's a stereotypical description of one person that might be a representative for a specific segment of your overall audience. It will represent that subset of your users. And it's conceived of as an individual users. We will give personas an actual name and refer to them that way as we're going through a project, a campaign, a digital experience over the course of an entire year, for example. So an archetype or a segment might be teachers or professional sports athletes or something like that, but a persona will be an actual named person. You want to create a specific but fictional person so that it forces you to really put yourself into that headspace. It's really easy to say, oh yeah, my target audience is financial advisors, and to sort of assume you understand what that means. But as soon as you call the financial advisor by a name and get specific about making up some criteria for what school did they go to, what neighborhood do they live in, what are some of the other unique goals and characteristics and emotions that person embodies, all of a sudden it really takes on a very real definition. And so I just named a few of those characteristics, but that's really what I'm getting at here. Are some of those characteristics to help shape and define your persona. So when we do this, we give them a name, we give them an age, we give them a job, and then there are, and you'll see check out the template I gave you now. There are other kind of traits, characteristics, influencing behaviors. There are brands that they maybe have affinity with that help you at a real glance. And this should be one page, maybe two, but it should be encapsulated on one page. Ideally, you can print it out and stick it on your wall and refer to it. And it should really feel like you've now identified with an actual person.
Scott, how many personas typically do you create? It seems like you can get really specific. Is there a minimum, or can you get out of control and create?
Well, the minimum's one.
Minimum's one, okay.
And that's not to suggest that you should have one persona that describes your entire audience. If you only do one, it needs to be for your most important audience segment. And then sort of if you do two or three, and from there, you'll usually, for us, we usually have 3 personas for every business unit, line of business, or campaign. Going too far beyond that, you're getting into a very elaborate campaign or engagement, and it's a lot more to manage. And quite often we'll do let's say we have 3 core ones, we might do a 4th or a 5th, but we will do that so that we can intentionally say our campaign is not focused on these or tangentially going to affect these particular personas. It's a really good question. Don't get too carried away with it because the higher quality you can do, the better. And too many gets a little bit too distracting and too much to manage.
I have one follow-up there from the audience, Scott, if you want to hit on that now, or we can
go
back to it. So, or maybe 2. So Dominique asks, what's the reasonable number of personas for B2B, for instance? So you might have given that answer.
Yeah. So again, practically speaking, especially when we're doing a B2B campaign, 2 or 3. You might have more if there are unique qualities for other branches of the business, other initiatives, but I wouldn't go too elaborate for any particular campaign.
Okay. And then last one, and maybe this is quick, maybe not, but what's the difference between building out a persona as opposed to just setting security settings for view, like a member versus non-member?
Sure. So security settings and who you're going to target are, and sort of their access and the content that's going to be positioned towards them are a functional way to deliver content or a specific experience. But a persona is used in a much higher level use case for the business. A persona is not just applied to the system or the CMS or the platform. A persona is used also at the boardroom table when you're planning a campaign, when your designer is doing creative, when your copywriter is creating content to say, here is our campaign objectives, here is our design objectives, and we're targeting something that's going to appeal to, on my screen right now, Charles Wong. So then the designer can read that, take a deep breath, get in the headspace, and relate to that particular audience segment by virtue of this persona. So you can also take that further and say, okay, now I've got a role, a security role or a membership role that reflects a persona. And I'll show you some examples of how that's done in Sitefinity and how you can track some of these using some of those specific roles. So it's not to say we don't get to the detail. If all you need is the detail, then don't worry about a persona, but a persona would be something that's a little bit higher level and supports the strategy and the work that the broader team is going to do together. Any other questions at the moment, Dan?
That's it. That's it for the moment.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So on my screen, I've got an example, a screenshot of a persona. Again, like I said, one page as much as you can, and the template that I've provided looks more or less like this to help you get an idea of how this can be built out. I'm going to tell you about the tools in a few slides. I'm going to show you some of those examples. Okay, so we've been talking about personas pretty heavily so far. I'm going to switch over and I'm going to talk about journey maps. So what is it? All right, again, this outlines the intended interaction with a digital product or experience. It doesn't have to be digital, but we're all digital professionals here, so we'll stay in that realm. But the persona just describes a person. A journey map describes the intended steps, the intended experience that you want that particular persona to follow. And it's an ideal scenario. It might change, and you might learn things about how well it's working, and you might adjust it as you go. But then all of a sudden, when you have this in place, it makes the implementation of a campaign or the website a little bit more obvious for everybody, and it gets the team on board. It gets your executives on board. So typically these are charted out using a timeline with dates and milestones to say, here are the steps that we want our persona, our users to go through. Now, this is not a user flow. So when you're talking about a user flow on the website, you're typically talking about the steps that are going to be included in a shopping cart experience or in a white paper download. These are the sequence that, that our experience is going to enable. A journey map is broader than that and less specific, but it does detail the specific steps that you want to have somebody complete in order to achieve a particular task or goal. And I think that's what's really important, is that a user flow might just sort of outline a sequence of steps, but a journey map is meant, or at least the way we do them, that's a qualifier there. The way we put these together is a journey map has to arrive at an ideal outcome, or in another, so with using another term, has to result in a conversion. And so it should describe all the user's interactions with that product or with your experience along the way. And it does not start necessarily on your website. So you may have other touch points, you may have other parts of your brand experience, of your business presence, where that journey is started. It might be an outbound call from your sales team, it might be an event, and those things might actually be interruptions to the digital journey as well. It might start life as an ad click coming to your website, filling out a contact form, there's a conversion. You might stop there, but then it might continue. A journey map can continue the experience past that first conversion to a demo, a phone call, a meeting, and right up until a contract is signed. And then you may have other journey maps that sort of pick up where certain ones leave off. Now, again, just like personas, you could get super carried away with this, and you could draw your ideal path till the end of the earth. But the objective is to take this as far as necessary to help you with your planning and your measurement of your digital experience. That's really key. These are here to say, okay, this is my ideal outcome. This is what I'm trying to enable. And it's totally valid to learn that you haven't gotten it right. And maybe you adjust your journey map because you're discovering something about the behavior of your users. Or maybe you need to do something to your experience so that you try and get back to that intended journey that was outlined by your journey map.
And Scott, how do you, if I could interrupt quickly, how do you know if they're following the journey, and how do you measure that?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, so there are some awesome capabilities within, you set me up for that one. There are some awesome capabilities in Sitefinity. So let me get into that in a second. So here's an example, a screenshot of a journey map. And one of the things that I didn't talk about on the last slide was sort of the emotional experience. And we find that this really helps when we're talking to our clients about how this is going to evolve and how we're going to bring a user through the experience. Because it's really easy to stop at the point that they've been that visitor's been delighted. Oh, they got the resource, they bought the product. Okay, wait a minute. Then what happens? There's anticipation. Maybe there's I'm coming back to an e-commerce scenario, but I think everybody can relate to that. So you've placed an order, but then what? And so there's sort of this cool down period, and we've got to consciously acknowledge that that is a step in the journey, so that in our planning we can account for that. We can send status updates, we can send thank yous, we can provide some additional resources and rich content that people can consume, while their order's being put together or the service is getting packaged for delivery. So I find that actually that sort of emotional measurement is a pretty valuable element of a journey map. So in the PDF that I gave you, it's not quite as visually wonderful as this example that I've got on my screen, but it just gives you that framework to help think about putting this together yourself. Specifically speaking, we don't use those PDFs that I shared with you. Those are just meant, as a guide and a reference point, as I mentioned. We use a tool called UXpressia. There's a few of these out there. It's a paid tool, but it's purpose-built for building personas and journey maps from a marketer's and a strategist planning perspective. We also use an online whiteboarding tool all the time. We use Miro. There's several of them out there. I know that Miro, if you search through their templates for personas and for journey maps, they have a few different options. And oftentimes we'll be drafting these things using those kinds of flow charting tools. And yes, of course, there's Sitefinity Insight, which I can give you a little bit of a sneak peek into at the moment. Here is in Sitefinity Insight a quick snapshot of what a persona might look like when you're using that tool. So I've got the sort of configuration screen superimposed on a bit of a dashboard here. But once you have that that persona drafted from a marketer's perspective, you can then overlay, like mentally overlay, what is the behavior, and you've got your journey map and your persona, you can overlay what is the behavior of this persona on my website. If this particular persona is coming to my website, what kind of content are they going to be consuming? Maybe what campaign have they interacted with? What are they searching for? Are they logged in or not? You might have a different persona for existing customers than for prospective customers. And there's a great deal of power that you can use here to help tell Sitefinity which traffic belongs to which persona. And then you'll actually get statistics and data here about how an entire audience segment is interacting with your website. This is not the kind of thing you can do with Google Analytics. This is so much more powerful and a lot more insightful. You'll actually understand, hey, wait a minute, is this audience segment even on my website? Are they consuming the content the way that I want them to, the way that I'm hoping they will be? And you can see at the bottom, you can then drill down on that on that persona and get specific about who are the actual known contacts. If they've gone through a gate, if they filled out a form, you actually know who they are. And you can get specific about the individuals that are within that persona. You can see the conversions that they're completing on your website, and the content that they're touching that's influencing that conversion. Journeys, more specifically, are super powerful, like I said, when you combine them with a conversion, with that moment where they perform a desired action. Now, normally, a conversion is when you're able to actually collect a little bit of data. A name, an email address, or a sign up, but not necessarily. We use conversions often in an anonymous fashion just when there's a signal of intent. And then you can compare that to the journey of specific users, specific contacts in your list to know what they did on the way to that particular moment. And you can see the content that was consumed and the touch points that they followed in order to get to that desired outcome or not. Because I think the lack of visibility into some of those is just as insightful and just as actionable as knowing what they did hit. It's the same advice I give to my son right now who's playing Wordle. Sometimes you got to burn a word, and that's just as informative as getting some of the letters right. So hopefully that's been able to give everybody a little bit of a boost in terms of planning out your digital experiences. We've got a few more minutes to take any final calls, but please take a minute to learn as much as you can about Sitefinity. Come visit Flywheel. Book a demo, have a look at the system itself. And if you're not ready to do any of those things, totally understand. Please connect with us on LinkedIn, and you're going to get additional information and news about these kinds of presentations, other insights in a nice passive way in your LinkedIn feed without being too bothered in your inbox. That's how I like to do it anyway. I'm not sure if everybody's the same, but we look forward to engaging with you and taking you on that journey with us as we go forward. And
then maybe Scott will give you some extra Wordle tips as well. So
yeah, you never know.
Yeah. Well, as Scott said, you can still follow up, connect on LinkedIn, and thanks for joining. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.